Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today on the Successful Failures podcast. Oh, man, we are on the next episode. I know I've been gone for a bit. Truthfully, I celebrated my birthday, and then I just got hit with some sickness that knocked me out cold. So when that happened, everything kind of backed up, and I was trying to spend my time getting better and getting healthy, and then everything in my own personal life just kind of piled up. So I finally got a chance to get back to the podcast and work on it. So thank you so much for your patience and joining me for the 24 subscribers I have. It really does mean a lot. Please, if you could do me a favor, could you like the video, subscribe, send it to your friends, build up this community. And if you really like the content and you want to support us monetarily, you can do that on our website. There will be a link in the description. And we're also on all streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Deezer, you name it, we are there. So I would love if you can just support us in any way possible, send clips to your friends. We also have a TikTok as well, so if you want to send shorter form content, you can follow us on the Successful Failures podcast on TikTok. Now today, we have an excellent interview. Oftentimes you can tell a lot about someone by how they handle good times, but you can really tell who they are and what their character is by how they handle bad times. And no man I know has done that better than probably Dave Kesterson, who's the guy I'm interviewing today. Dave has gone through some things that in its own right would stop lesser men. And he went through so much stuff, and yet one thing I've always known is, as I've known him my entire life, I've always seen him with a smile on his face, always joyful, even when times have been hard. So today we have a very excellent conversation where we get into the nitty-gritty. We get down to the details on how do you even handle stress, grief, loss, and what do you do when it feels like your entire world is collapsing? It's a long one today, but every second of this podcast is good, so I hope that you enjoy it today. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining me today, David.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
I actually never asked you this. Is it Dave or David?
Well, it's technically David, but the only time I ever got called David is when I was in trouble. So I as a kid. So
okay, so I won't do that then.
Dave is fine.
Awesome. Well, just to kind of preface everything, I grew up knowing about you. You've been around my family for basically my entire life. And one thing that I've really come to respect about you is you've been through some of the hardest things that I can imagine people have ever been through. And yet you seem like you always have such joy. And I don't think happiness is the right word, because happiness is so... It doesn't really describe well when you're going through painful days. So really, unlike most podcasts, I usually have a bunch of questions that I kind of have prepared. But I think for today, I really just kind of want you to share your story. And I feel like we can unpack that. And personally, at least for me, I feel like I can learn a lot from how you've handled some of the low points and the high points in your life. So wherever you want to start, I'd love to just listen in and take it in.
Well, that sounds great. And to be quite honest, the reason that I agreed to, do a podcast or anything like that was my end goal is everyone goes through challenges. Sometimes people are very quiet about it and silent, and they don't speak about it. Other people are a little bit more vocal, and I think we oftentimes when we go through challenges, life challenges, serious life challenges, we kind of hide them, and we don't really address those. And so my goal today is hopefully, to give other people hope that they can go through life challenges and all that and come out on the other side victorious. And as you mentioned, happiness, I'm kind of with you that the joy is a key thing. Is I choose every day to have a great day. And when I give you a little bit of my story and my testimony of the stuff that I've been through, you would think, how do you have any joy in your life? And so, get honest with you, some of it I actually forgot about. And so as I was I wanted to be prepared. And as I was going through my notes and looking at things, I was kind of in shock with some of the stuff that I found that I had completely forgotten about, because it hit with a life circumstance. Sometimes you get hit with stuff that, let me take a step back. I used to think that the things I thought were important after some of these life circumstances, you find out how insignificant those things are in your life, and you really reevaluate and maybe change your perspective on how you view life, the world, the things of beauty. And so that was a really big kind of a aha moment for me. So just kind of give you a little bit of insight. So in 2003, we lost our house to an F2 tornado. It was direct to our house, winds of 140 miles an hour. Um, Now I look back and laugh at some of that because when I happened, uh, I couldn't hear it. I could just feel the pressure of it.
Hmm.
And my late wife Trudy said to me, she said, um, she could hear it. She said it sounded like a freight train, but for me, I just felt the pressure. And so, not knowing what's going on, water's running everywhere. I'm thinking, well, we've got a blown pipe. So I walk up to the top of the stairs, and I'm like, water's just pouring in, and I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know what's going on.
Oh, so it
And
ripped the roof off?
yeah, so I'm looking up, and I'm thinking, there's got to be a broken water pipe. I remember saying to Trudy, I said, I wonder why that ceiling, why is the ceiling moving? Because it was just shifting, and I realized I'm looking at the sky. I mean, there's no roof; it's gone. Well, that was the first one. That was in 2003, and we literally, I was the only one in the neighborhood that heard the sirens. Now,
Hmm.
usually, I got to be honest, I was not a run to the basement type of person ever. When I heard the sirens, for whatever reason, I think God had a little plan for me. I got up, I was walking down the hall. My oldest daughter handed me my youngest daughter, and we got to the basement. Literally 15 seconds, we were down there. We climbed under an area to protect ourselves, and that's when it hit. I
Hmm.
mean, it wasn't more than 15 seconds. Um, when we came back up, I was blown away. It took us about an hour to get out of the house because we didn't know if there was down power lines or anything like that. So we had to call authorities. I actually have they actually did an article and it's called the Message Magazine. Long story short, when the roof was ripped off, um, after all that was said and done, we were able to go up and I don't know if you can see that picture, Drew, but that's a picture of the front of the house. And so right above it, I wrote "Jesus Saves" really in big black bold magic markers. I don't know if you can see that at all.
Oh yeah, I just can.
Yeah, I can't make it out very good. So yeah, so that and when the following day when we had daylight, we go and we look at everything and uh my daughter's doors are they're just everything's ripped off. The roof's gone. Their doors are gone. There's glass shards in the hallway from the bedroom windows. So I that was the first big thing that happened. I remember the next day, or that the next day it was probably I want to say 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, and uh, call me crazy. I was out shooting baskets, and somebody said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Shooting baskets." They're like, "But you just lost your house." I said, "So I got my basketball. I didn't know what." I looked at him. I said, "Well, I just felt like shooting baskets. I mean, there's nothing I can do. I mean, there's really nothing I can do. So I just want to shoot baskets. So that's what I did. So that was probably the first thing that happened. Then in 2005, um, Trudy she ended up having a hysterectomy and it went extremely poorly. She ended up having 4 surgeries, and she had a uh, colostomy bag for I think 4 months. So she had a catheter
Ah.
for about 4 months. Then in 2006, I lost my job. That same year, she contracted viral meningitis, and that can kill people. And I remember I went to church. It was a Wednesday night. I went to church, and she said, I'm not feeling too good. I'm going to stay home. So very, very rare that she ever doesn't go, but she opted to stay home. And so I took the kids to church and we came home and I found her laying on the floor and she said she felt like she was bleeding to death on the inside. She basically, her ureter tube had ruptured and going septic. So
Oh my God.
so she ended up with 4 surgeries there. She was like a rock though. Nothing phased her. And then in 2008, probably the one of the biggest defining moments in my life. My sister and 4 kids were murdered by my brother-in-law. He opted to take their lives before committing suicide himself. He was a vice president at a bank. Um, I was blown away. I wasn't sure if it was still on the internet, so I Googled the Simple murders today, and sure enough, it's still all active and everything. So he was a banker. He embezzled a bunch of money, and he ended up killing my sister and the 4 kids. Um, and there are defining moments in your life where you know exactly where you are when a certain thing happens.
Mhm.
I remember I was at my daughter's school conference and my mom called, and so I didn't answer. But it was really unusual because my mom never called back because she always knew if I saw that I missed a call, I would call her, whenever I had a free second. But she called right back. And so we were on our way to the car, and I got to the car, and she said, "They're gone." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And she said, um, "Cheryl and the kids are gone. Steve killed them." And,
Jeez.
I just was like, "What are you talking about?"
That's how you
And
found out?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so, at that point in time, I mean, my head was just spinning. Like I couldn't really grasp what my mom was telling me. I just knew that I needed to get to Iowa City to my parents' house. It was just I grew up, I just had a younger sister, so it was Cheryl and I. So we drove to Iowa City. We got to my mom and dad's house, and it was really like you see some of the old war shows where, the military, after a military person is killed in battle, and they bring them up. The gentlemen come in suits to notify the next of kin, and I was in the house, and it was actually the FBI, I believe, and I think it was the FBI, no, I take that back. Department of Criminal Investigations, the DCI in Iowa,
Oh,
came to the door, and then they wanted to speak to us collectively, and then they had to rule us out as having any involvement. So then the
hmm.
questions turned towards, instead of just being about this is what happened, then they started asking us questions. They wanted to make sure I actually banked at the bank my brother-in-law worked at, and so they wanted to make sure there was no money that exchange hands or anything like that. So it was kind of a dirty
Hmm.
feeling, like I had nothing to do with this, but it is what it is. So I remember when all that happened. Um, yeah, um, we as we were getting prepared for the funeral, I actually met with a woman, BJ Franklin, just a blessing. She came to me and she says, "Dave, this is worldwide news." She said, "You can control it or they're going to control it." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She says, "Well, I think the way to handle this is just go ahead and allow one news feed in, and then they can disseminate it amongst the others. Otherwise, you're going to have literally hundreds and hundreds of cameras." And
Yeah.
so I'm like, well, that makes perfect sense. I mean, the I remember the visitation, I think, for my sister's funeral started at 11, and I think we were still there at 11 o'clock at night. It was actually supposed to start at 2, but we got there early. And at about 11:30, people started coming in, and it literally, well, the, the line was, I had heard at one point was like a mile long.
Oh my
It,
God.
yeah. So it literally went on from about 11:30 till, 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. And it was just, yeah, it was absolutely, and again, I understand that when you're burying 6 members of your family, I still have a hard time wrapping my arms around it that you're laying 6 members of your family to rest in one day. For
Hmm.
us, with my sister's family and my family, there was about 13, 14 of us, for Christmas dinners, Thanksgivings, things like that. Well, you take 6 people out of that equation, and all of a sudden your world gets real small.
Hmm.
So again, that was in 2008. And then 3 months later, we had the floods of '08 here in Iowa, and I lost three of my rental properties in the flood. So, yeah, it was little compounded.
So in the same year, you
Yeah,
lose your sister, her husband, her four kids, and basically almost all your equity.
yeah, yep, yep, and yeah, one fell swoop. Just to give you an idea of, kind of where I was at mentally. So I had one rental unit that was just an efficiency, and is all I had to do is I had to put down some vinyl flooring, and it was only 450 square feet, so it should have taken me at most a day, probably a half a day to do it. But after this happened to my sister, I didn't look at it for the longest time. I think it was 9 months before I could get it completed. I mean,
You couldn't do it.
yeah, I was depressed. I mean, my poor kids had a, I guess I could back up. So, um, at the time, I was married. I shouldn't say was married. My wife and I were together for, almost 29 years. I lost her to pancreatic cancer. I'll address that here in a little bit. We have three biological kids and two kids that we adopted. So we had five kids. Um, but yeah, those four kids, I mean, I hate to say it, but they got kind of leftovers of what dad had mentally going on there.
Hmm.
And a mistake after my sister was killed, I waited like 2 months before I went and saw somebody and said, "Hey, I need some help here." They put me on some antidepressants, and then I went and saw a therapist or a counselor, I don't know what it's called. Um, and unfortunately, I remember years ago how that was so stigmatized that that was a bad thing. I just knew I needed some help. Um, and I couldn't wait anymore. So I went and got some help. I'll come back to that a little bit later. Then in 2011, my mom was I lost my mom to COPD. Actually, it was one day after my birthday. It was August 9th, and I think back. I think she was just trying to hold on till my birthday came, and then that was in 2011, and that was August 2011, and then January of 2012, not 5 months later, my dad was diagnosed with leukemia, uh, and it was AML, which is the, really the fastest, one of the most aggressive types of leukemia. He opted to do chemo, uh, but after the second round, um, I could tell he was struggling. He was losing. Keep, I'm I'm 6'1". I weigh 200 pounds. I At one point I was up to 240 or yeah, about 240. My dad was 5'9", 125 pounds, and
Oh,
he was losing about 5 pounds a week.
oh my God.
So he and I had a heart to heart sit down conversation, and I just said, "Dad, you don't have to do this." And he said to me, "I'm not a quitter." And I said, "Dad, this isn't about quitting. This is about quality of life."
Hmm.
And so we had after that conversation, he had said, "I don't want to do this anymore." And so I said, "Okay." Then I said, "Do you want to go somewhere? I mean, do you want to, you know, go see the Cubs?" My dad was a big Cubs fan. "You want to go see the Cubs? You want to do this, whatever." He didn't want to do that, but he just didn't want to do the chemo and radiation, and that
Hmm.
we agreed on that. And that was January 2012. May of 2012, I lost my best friend. Um, I don't even really know whatever happened. Uh,
Hmm.
he has stepbrothers, stepsisters. Some of them I don't even know if they know. Uh, I can't speculate on what happened. I just know that he had a back surgery, and what I think happened is because uh, I had to go identify him. I think that he had taken his pain medications up, didn't think, and was in pain, didn't think he took it, and then took them again. It's the only thing I can think of. I don't
Hmm.
know. I'm just speculating because no one's ever been able to tell me what happened there. So that
Hmm.
was it. That was in May. And then in August of that same year of 2012, that's when August 23rd, I believe my dad passed away from complications of leukemia. So Yeah, so the cancer word in my house was just not a real fun word. And this is the one that I forgot about. So in October 2012, I'm coming back from Missouri. Keep in mind, my dad passed away in August. I inherited his Park Avenue, his old Park Avenue. And I remember him specifically telling me, Dave, you take care of this car, you'll have it for a really long time. And I'm like, well, it's nothing real fancy, but I mean, it rode like a dream. So I
Hmm.
had a conference in Missouri. I'm driving back to Missouri, and I hit a deer head on, and I mean, it blew the car up. I mean, it totaled the car. When I finally did get back and had it taken the shot, the estimate on it was like 12 grand, and it was like I think it was like 2000 Park Avenue or something like that. But, but it was my dad's car. So so this is kind of another weird side note. So I'm in Missouri. The whole front of the car is the hood's buckled. I can't see over the hood, and their cars passed me, and nobody stopped to see if I was okay. Well, I mean, it was on a deserted road in Missouri, so I couldn't go forward because everything was hanging. So I stuck the car in reverse, and I remembered seeing a exit ramp and I didn't know what I saw, but I knew that I had passed an off ramp or something. So I stuck it in reverse, and I drove like 2 miles in reverse with antifreeze and everything coming out of the front and all that. And so I get in. It's a truck stop, so I pull in, and there's a truck area, and then there's basically like a convenience store, and I just go. So I go in, and I'm like, I made the mistake of sending Trudy a text picture of the car, but I didn't say I was okay. So she's calling me, going, "What's going on?" I said, it's okay. She goes, "Don't you ever don't ever send me a picture and not tell me you're okay." I'm like, "Okay, I bet." So I call a wrecker, and it's going to be 5 hours before they get to me. It's going to be $300 to get it home, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh." So I'm standing there, I'm just contemplating. I'm looking at the car, and I don't know what to do. And out of the blue, there's a guy comes walking out of the convenience thing, and he said, "Man, that's not good." I go, "No." And he goes, "Where are you heading?" I go, "Well, I was heading back home to Cedar Rapids." And he just looked at me. He goes, I know this is gonna sound strange, but he goes, "I'm on my way to Waterloo. I pick up John Deere tractors, and I transport them around the country." And he goes, "I have my flatbed trailer over here. I can have it loaded up in 20 minutes." He goes, "I've never done this before, but if you want me to, I can get you home." And his name is Jay, and to this day we still stay connected. It was the cool Going back through town for another tractor, you let me know so we can get a cup of coffee or something. So he literally loads it up, and I'd never driven it. I'd never ridden in a semi before, so I thought it was pretty cool. It was a Harley Davidson semi on top of it. So you know, my bags go off and snap both of my thumbs all the way back. So I can hardly move my hands, but I'm trying to text, and I sit and I'm like, "Hey, I'm in this cool Harley Davidson semi riding home," and Kerson. I think people probably thought I had a screw. So get back to Cedar Rapids, he unloads everything. Cool story there. Um, and then probably the biggest one that's probably impacted me. Well, obviously, losing my sister to 4 kids was huge. And I remember, Drew, I remember this. I remember saying to myself, at least I'll never have to experience that kind of pain again. I thought there can be nothing. I could just, in my head, like finite mind, I thought there can be nothing this painful. And then it was right before COVID. Um, Trudy and I, we finally took our honeymoon after almost 29 years. We took our honeymoon. It was 8 at the time. We finally took our honeymoon to Hawaii. Uh, and literally the last day we were there, they closed the beaches due to COVID and everything. So
Hmm.
we get back from that honeymoon, and it was June. We get back in March. And it was maybe 2 to 3 months later, she sends me a picture and says, do I look kind she sends me a picture and says, do my eyes look kind of jaundiced? And I'm like, I don't see anything. Well, the next day she sends me another picture and she goes, I'm definitely jaundiced. And I looked at her and I went, oh. So we immediately took her to the hospital. I went and picked her up. We took her to the hospital. We were there for, I want to say, a couple hours. They came in and said, well, we believe you have a tumor, but we want you to go to Iowa City, to the University of Iowa hospitals. So we went from Mercy Hospital to the University of Iowa hospitals, and we got down there, and they started doing tests, um, and found out that she had pancreatic cancer. So they talked to us about some different options, and you know, it was so when somebody experiences something like cancer, I never tell somebody, hey, you should do this, hey, you should do this, because it's such a personal choice. Um, but I know there are a lot of people out there that'll say, hey, you got to do chemo, you got to do radiation or whatever. And my whole thing with that was my job was to surround her with people who believed in whatever she wanted to do. And we were going to fight this like champions, and we are going to do whatever we needed to do. Um, and so there's a clinic in Mexico, that provided, um, in the United States, I won't get into all the details, but in the United States, there's a way that you could do stem cell transplants and things along those lines. Well, in Mexico, they could add cancer fighting agents as well. It increases your cancer fighting ability. I wanted to say it was an astronomical number. So we thought, well, maybe this might be the best option. So we started doing some research on that, and it was a Monday, and we were talking about it. And on Wednesday, they called and said we can get her in on Friday.
Hmm.
The problem is, uh, with a lot of, I mean, this is one of my frustrations that I'm still trying to figure out how to deal with this. But chemo and radiation are not considered experimental. But we also know that a lot of that really is not good I mean, people's immune system is just crushed when they go through chemo and radiation. So Trudy actually chose to go an alternative route, but because she went an alternative route and it wasn't chemo and radiation, the insurance company would cover it.
Hmm.
So it was completely out of pocket. Um, and um, and obviously I had rental income. When she got sick, she was able to not go to work, and we really did notice a real change in our lifestyle. And then I ended up working from home because of COVID. You know, everybody says COVID was such a bad thing, and don't get me wrong, if you lost a loved one, it was absolutely horrible. I don't want to misconstrue that. But for me personally, and my relationship with my wife, us having COVID forced us to spend way more time than we would have
Hmm.
had had COVID not been there. And so I think about the blessings I had because we were together. We did a garden for the first time in 29 years. It was a big garden. The kids came over and helped. It was just we just did something that we had never really done before. So that was quite a blessing. But anyway, back to the whole story about the cancer treatment. So it was going to it was going to cost us, you know, I mean, it's not chump change. It was about $33,000 in my pocket. Well, this day, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm like, how am I going to do this? Because there's no way I can. I mean, I'm thinking about selling a property. I'm thinking about all these things, but there's just no way in 2 days I get that done. And one of Trudy's friends, bless her, I don't want to name her because she would never want the limelight. So I said, I will give you the money. Just pay us back what you can, or pay me back what you can. So that was on a Wednesday. So Friday we fly to Mexico for treatments. Um, and so that was in July of 2020. She was diagnosed. She put up a great fight. It was 9 months. Um, And then on April 3rd, 2021, she passed away from the pancreatic cancer. Oh, I didn't think that was going to hit me again like that.
It's okay. Take your time.
But you know, um, there's some amazing things through this entire story. One of them was my wife is dying from cancer, and uh, 2 days before the she passed away, my pastor's wife showed up at the door. I said, "Well, what are you here for?" She said, "Well, I want to talk to you, and I kind of wanted him to be here." And I said, "Well, you couldn't have just talked to me." And I'm right. Uh, Kind of a funny side note. So for years, I don't know if she had a premonition or what, but ever since the kids were like 8 or 9, she would always tell the kids, "Hey, if anything ever happens to me, you get your dad married off as quickly as possible. We realize he's going to be a little." That's exactly what she said. Well, 2 days before she passes, my pastor's wife show up and they come in and they're sitting on the couch and she's talking to me and she says, "I just want you to know I want you to move on. I want you to get married and I want you to be happy." And I'm sitting there thinking,
Your wife said that to you?
yeah, like I still marvel at the compassion of a woman who is dying that is worried about me. I just can't even wrap my arms around it. It's just still, to me, is just blows me away to the character, the type of person that she was. And your mom knows. I mean, your mom and Trudy were really, really close friends. And um, so that was, I mean, that was absolutely incredible. Um, and I'll come to that a little bit later, but I remember at her visitation, um, I mean, there was 1,000, 1,200 people that had come through. I mean, there was a line from the church all the way to the very back of the parking lot, and our parking lot is huge. Like I mean, like if I wanted to throw, I mean, I don't even know if I could, but if I wanted to throw a football, it would take, you know, 4 throws for me to get it to the end of the parking lot. Now, granted, my arm's not what it used to be, but so it was absolutely incredible. Uh, the amount of people that came. So, when I look at uh, some of life circumstances and some other things, obviously we were slammed with stuff. I mean, from losing our house to a tornado or 4 surgeries, you know, viral meningitis, losing my sister and the 4 kids to basically to a murder suicide, losing 3 properties in the flood, losing my mom to COPD, my dad being diagnosed and passing from leukemia, my best friend passing away at 36. Um, Hitting the deer is probably not in the whole scheme of things. It's probably not the big. And then obviously losing my wife. Yeah, so we just we got hit. I mean, there's just no way. There's no other way to look at it. So I remembered after my sister and 4 kids were murdered. It was probably it was probably a year later that the joy came back. We talked about joy at the beginning. It's probably about a year before the joy came back. And I shouldn't share this, but I will because when you go through some trials, sometimes you just don't want to hear people whining and complaining. I don't, and unfortunately, in the world we live in, social media, people whine and complain. Because of that, I have a 3 strike rule on Facebook. You whine and complain once, everybody can have a bad day. You do it a second time, I make a mental note. Third time it happens, I just block you. I don't listen to anything because I don't do negativity in my life. If we want to compare stories, I think my story sucks worse. He said, "You got to write a book," and I said, "Who wants to read a book that about such much normal things? Who wants to read a book on that?" But I had walked in. This is probably 3 months after my sister was killed, and I walked into I won't name the name, but it was a locksmith, and I walked in, and the gal every time I go in, she whoa whoa whoa, the economy, this that whatever, and so I tried to play it off and say, yeah, it's been kind of rough lately, and And she just kept complaining. And I said, well, I've kind of had a pretty rough year too. And she just, Drew, I got to be honest with you. I wasn't trying to be compassionate. Hey, this horrible thing to say. I just wanted her to shut up. That's all I wanted her to do. So she's whining, whining. I said, yeah, 304 kids were murdered by my brother. Just blew it out. And she stopped. She was turned away from me, and she stopped. She turned, and she looked, and she just started sobbing. And I said, Dave, you're an idiot. You are an absolute. But now I preface this. Every time I went into the locksmith afterwards, and she would see me, she would actually have a little skip in her step because she knew I was probably not the one to whine and complain to. So she every time I would go in there, she would adjust how she responded. But we all have a choice every day what we're going to do. One of the things after my sister and the kids were killed, one of the first things that came to my mind is, how do I honor my sister with what I do here? And so that's always in the back of my mind. My sister was a school teacher. She was just, I mean, she had her master's in education. They adopted 4 kids from Korea. It was just, I mean, she was really, really good. And so, I see how the Lord has taken me on a path that I just wasn't expecting. I became a children's pastor. I did that for almost 5 years. Never, and that, like I had all the schooling 7 years before. And I was teaching a college and career group, and I felt like it was time to step down, like there was something else. And we put in for the position. Well, actually, here's how that story went. So this is kind of cool too. You just see God's hand and stuff. So Trudy had the worst day. Trudy ran our church daycare, 65, 70 kids, and she did that for 16, almost 17 years. She leaves work. It's one of the roughest days she's ever had. And she's leaving work, and Lord says, you need to put in for this. And it was the children's pastor position. And I had stepped down from my college and career group, and I kept saying to myself, Lord, I know you got something else in store. I just don't know what it is. And I'm just in limbo thinking, I don't know. I have no clue. So she calls me and says, the Lord told me we were supposed to put in for this. And I said, well, way to think outside the box. And she goes, it wasn't me. And I said, I know I'm kidding. So she gets home and I tell her what I've been praying about. And so I said, is the position even open? I said, I have no idea. So she calls our office manager at the church and says, hey, just da da da. Well, it wasn't 15 minutes later, we get a phone call from the pastor's wife, and they want to take us to dinner. So I had a conversation. She said, well, what do we do? I said, well, we have certain business requirements because we're business owners. I said, we have certain things that just are non-negotiables. I said, we got to be out of town, so many times a year for business. I said, what do we do? And she goes, what do we do? And I said, well, we just throw it out there. I said, I don't think they're going to be okay with it, but I said, we can't hokey pokey this. I said, we're either all in or not. So I said, let's just, we walk away and we get home, and I look at her and I go, what just happened? Because they wanted us to be the children's pastor. I looked at her and I'm like, I have no idea what just hit us. And I'm very type A, and in my house with her, I'm type A. It's just in my DNA. And she's very, she at the time was very, laid back, chill, just never real high, never real low. Kids had an issue. They went to their mom. They didn't really come to me. They probably wondered what kind of response they were going to get. So, but when we became the children's pastors, holy cow, I saw a type A in her come. I'd never seen that before. And so, and I was kind of butting heads with her for like 3 or 4 months. And finally, one day I'm like, sitting there, Dave, you're a dentist. Your wife's a degree, and you're fucking her on this, that, or the other thing. So I'm like, you're right. So I got out of the way, and I flourished as a children's pastor, and not because of what I was doing. I just let her do her thing, and I handled a lot of the administrative stuff, with dealing with parents. She handled the curriculum. She was absolutely fantastic. But there's a couple other things I was going to mention. So back, and this kind of ties in with on the podcast. So back about, it's been about a little over a year ago, maybe 2022. I was contacted by a company out of the UK. They wanted to do a documentary on, my situation. And um, after my sister and kids were murdered, I had People Magazine. I had all these people reaching out to me, and they wanted to do interviews, this, that, and the other thing. I just was not wanting to do that. I think they all wanted to, for lack of a better term, they wanted the blood and gore things to kind of promote their stuff.
They
And I
want to
just,
monetize it.
yeah, I just didn't want any part of that. Well, this company from the UK contacted me, and the only reason I agreed to their interviews and to be part of the documentary was because I was told that I said, if this is going to be a guts and gore thing, I don't really want to do with it. But I said, if I can help somebody who's walked through difficult circumstances, um, maybe go down a better path, I'm willing to do that. And so I agreed to the podcast. They said, yeah, you can kind of steer it however you want. So I talked about my faith throughout that documentary. Well, they edited every single faith comment out of the entire documentary. It's actually on Discovery Plus right now. It's called Deadliest Mums and Dads. It's MUMS because it's out of the UK. It's season 2, episode 2. But they took every single faith comment that I had and they cut it out. And why is that? And that's part of the reason that I kind of want to get on with you today is because I'm going to be quite honest with you and very direct, Drew. Uh, if it wasn't for my relationship with Christ, I don't think I'd be. Uh, I'm not trying to, I don't want to sound over dramatic or anything like that, but I really don't think I'd be. Um, I battled some stuff when I was younger. Alcohol was a big issue. Messed around with some other stuff I shouldn't have been messing around with. And then after Trudy died, 9 months after Trudy died, uh, Caleb, my son, his best friend, and I know he doesn't have a problem with me talking about it because he talks about his faith all the time. 9 months after his mom died, his best friend died of a drug overdose. Well, at the time, they thought it was a heart condition. Long story short, Caleb starts and he gets involved with alcohol and drugs, and it spiraled out of control. We ran a company together. We did a lawn care company. It's just spiraled out of control. And finally, I sat him down one day and I said, Caleb, I said, this is how this is going to end. One of two ways. Either I'm going to get a call that you're dead or you're in jail. That's how it's going to end. So I sat him one day and I said, what do you want to do? You want to get some help? And he said, yes. And that was a Friday. We couldn't get him in till Monday. He went into, he checked into the area substance abuse counseling, and got some help there. One of the things, I worked for many, many years adult corrections. So I told him when he went in, I said, listen, Caleb, there's going to be some people that are court ordered there that are not going to, they're going to only be there because they have to be, not because they want to be. And so I said, a couple things I want you to take a hold of is look at the people who are serious about change and gravitate towards them. And then I had a conversation with them. I said, listen, I don't have any problems with the 12-step program, but when they want to name higher power, you and I both know Jesus is the higher power. And he was in full agreement. Since that time, it's been probably 21 months. He's been clean and sober. He had Department of Human Services involved because of the things he was dealing with and him just having a child. All that's behind him. I mean, that right there is, and he'll tell you that it's his relationship with Christ. It's it's not all the other things. He'll tell you that's part of it. But unfortunately, when people go through trials and tribulations, we live in a culture where it's much better than it was, let's say, 10 years ago to say, hey, I need some help. Like when I went on antidepressants, people were like, you're going to take antidepressants? I go, yeah, I'm going to take antidepressants. I'm not in a good place. So I either take something and hopefully get through this, or I ain't going to be here. That's the bottom line. So, and then, the same thing with therapy. So after Trudy passed away, this time I said, I was 2 weeks after, it was 2 weeks. I found out I'm an emotional eater. I gained 10 pounds in 12 days.
Hmm.
I got to the heaviest point I'd ever been. And right around 240, they said, I can't do this anymore. So I called my doctor, made an appointment, went in. They put me on antidepressants. They sent me to a psychiatrist. I was diagnosed with PTSD, and I just told the guy, sneaking for labels. I said, I think anybody that went through what I went through, losing my wife, we were married almost 29 years, is entitled to be depressed.
Hmm. Yeah.
But and then I went and saw a therapist, and I'm not apologetic about it. I think that we live in a society that, as guys, we're taught to be macho and all that stuff. But man, oh man, just be honest with, your feelings and deal with them. Because the thing with grief, Drew, is you're going to sweep it under the rug. But if you do that, eventually it's going to come out, and
Hmm.
it's gonna be like a grenade. You're gonna, it's not going to be good.
Yeah.
And I recognized that early on. And I remember, so when I'm talking about some of the things that I did to kind of get through, one of the other things I did is I took the grief share class. And in that grief share class, I think it was, so when we would go, it was kind of like an AA group where you kind of say who you are and talk about what got you there. But I sobbed. I couldn't speak. So every week Trudy would speak for me and say, hey, da, 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 da. That happened for 4 weeks. Week 5, we get to it. And same way, I can't really, I mutter a few words, but I'm just a basket case. In that class, they said, if you knew the answer to the why, would it make you hurt any less? And I recognized right there that I had to do something that, like, even if my brother-in-law could have given me a logical reason for doing what he did, and I say this, Drew, I believe it in all my heart. If he would have lived, I think I could have sat down and had a conversation with him. I never could accept what he had done, but I felt like I could do that. I honestly believe I could have sat down with him. I remember I got bashed in the media because after my sister was killed, uh, I said the easiest thing to do that week was forgive my brother-in-law, and people went nuts with that. Like I wasn't accepting what he did, but when it comes to forgiveness, it's not for the other person, and so I could move on, and so I really needed that to kind of be able to move forward. Uh,
Yeah. Can we park there for a second?
Absolutely.
So your your sister, her 4 kids die from her husband, and at the funeral, you forgive the man that killed your sister and 4 kids. And I think like you and I both know like that has to be the faith that compels us because there's no way, in my opinion, that you can have an experience like that without and forgive someone without faith. But walk me through the process of trying to grieve that and also forgiving him at the same time.
Well, for me personally, um, it wasn't, that I think some of the confusion in how people viewed it. I didn't really have to contemplate it. I
Hmm.
just, I just believed in my heart of hearts that, you know, I just think about all that Christ had done for me, and I just said to myself, I think about all the things that I've done, maybe to other people, offended them, hurt them, and all that. And I just said, I can't really judge that. It's all I can do is forgive, because again, it didn't matter what he would tell me. There's nothing he could have said that could have justified what he did. And sometimes we get hung up on stuff that's just not important. And at that point in time, my sister and those kids aren't here. He's not here. Um, I didn't want to become a bitter human being.
Hmm.
I just didn't want it to. I give you like I said, I'll give you an example of, so this gentleman in the church, young man, um, uh, he was married, um, and again, I got to be just kind of cautious how I word this because I don't want anybody to
Of course.
put two and two together, and I want to be respectful, but uh, he was accused of assaulting his wife. Um, they divorce, but every week he's got to see his in-laws. His wife decides to attend another church, but every week he comes and he sees his in-laws. He comes in, week out, week in, week out. And I sat there and I watched this and I'm like, how do you do this?
Hmm.
I don't know how you do this. So, you know, when I went to that class that on that Wednesday, I said, well, I got to be honest with you. And then the whole thing about that story about this kid coming each and every week, his ex-wife a year later admits that she lied because she just wanted out of the marriage. So I'm watching this kid every time, and he's pretty young at the time, and I'm watching this and I'm thinking, oh my gosh! But every week, every Sunday, every Wednesday, every Sunday, every Wednesday, he was at church, and so I felt like, uh, we often want to glean stuff because from the older folks. Well, I'm gleaning this from this kid, and I don't know how I would share another story. I got a friend going through a divorce. He calls me. He's telling me what's going on. And I said, I don't think it's over. And he said, he looked me square in the eye a year later. He said, I thought you had a screw loose. Anyway, they separate. This kid goes, shovels the driveway, shovels the walks, mows the lawn. He does everything as if they're married, and she's seeing someone else.
Hmm.
And he does this week in, week out. And the beauty of the story is, it's about a year later, maybe a year and a half. Uh, he, Trudy had called. She said, "Did you hear about so and so?" And I go, "No." He said, "They're back together." He said, "It's better than they've ever been." I go, "What?" So he and I connect, and he's telling me the whole story. He goes, "When you told me, you thought that," because I'd been praying with him, and I said, I just don't have that peace like it's over. I said, I think, I don't know why. I said, this doesn't happen very often, but I said, I just really feel peace in my heart that like this isn't over.
Hmm.
And he goes, I thought you had a screw loose. And so, there's sometimes people ask me why I have faith, and I've just seen too many things to not have faith.
Hmm.
That same kid that, his wife left him and all that, that same kid. And again, this doesn't happen all the time, Drew, and I don't want to sound like I'm all spiritual because I'm not. But for a while there, I was, and how do I word this? So when I was younger, when I felt like the Holy Spirit told me to do something, just it wasn't in my nature to not do it. That was just on how it was. I remember one time specifically, Lord said, "Don't." Caleb said, "Dad, can I go get some out of the van?" I said, "Yeah, don't lock the keys in it because." Well, first I got that feeling like the Holy Spirit saying, "Don't give him the keys," and I'm like, so I'm thinking, okay, I probably need to pay attention to that. So I tell Caleb, whatever you do, and keep in mind he was a kid, he was 12, 13. I said, don't lock the keys in it. It's the only set we got, and we're out of town. So he goes, okay. So he goes, he comes back in. I said, hey, can I get my keys? He looks at me, he locks the keys in the van. So as I got older, I started to listen to those cues when I would hear the Holy Spirit, like where I really felt like the Lord was saying, "Hey, do this, do that." Well, this kid, the same kid that was separated from his wife, this was earlier than that. I just felt the unction to call him. I don't know why. I just really felt like, hey, I got to call this kid. So I call him. We talk for like 35 minutes on the phone. Year and a half later, he comes to me and goes, and then I called him, I would call him as I felt prompted. after that, and he goes, "How do you always know when to call?" I go, "It's well, every time you call, it's like like I really need, I really needed that." And so he goes, and I go, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "You know that call that you made to me about a year ago, year and a half ago?" He goes, "I was walking. He was literally was walking to buy drugs. I called it while he was walking to go get the drugs. Well, we were on the phone conversation for so long. He walked past the drug dealer's house on the whole way back home, and ended up literally right in front of his house when he got off the phone. And he goes, I looked up. I'm standing in front of my house, and he goes, I just said, forget it. Went in the house, and that was the last time he ever did drugs.
Hmm.
So, another reason why I have faith. And again, there's so many things I don't do right in my life, but I'm feeling like as I've gotten older, I'm more in tune with to say, hey, if I get that prompting, I act on it. I don't wait. In the past, I would have waited, but now I don't do that as much.
Yeah. So, obviously I assume you've been in like recovery groups, right? Yeah. So, the serenity prayer of like, God grant me the serenity to accept the things that cannot change, courage to change the things that can, and wisdom to know difference. Um, I feel like when you're going through the death of your sister and her kids, or the death of your wife, or even like the smaller stuff, part of you feels out of control, and like you're trying to grab on something and you don't know what to grab on. How are you able to kind of realize that you can't control the situation, but you can control how you handle it? Like, how did you get to that point? Because that's not a normal reaction people have.
Um, well, I guess I've done enough read that, and for lack of a better term, self-help books that I've recognized that that uh, if it's up to be, it's up. If it's to be, it's up to me type thing. That
Mm.
they have, you know, we have a responsibility in some of the decisions that we make, and I can choose to have a bad day, or I can choose to have a good day, and I'm not sure, Drew, if I can bottle it, I'd be a millionaire. But I really don't know what it is, other than you know making sure my head's on straight with my faith. Um, I'll be real upfront. After my sister was killed, there was probably a year that went by that I couldn't even read the Bible.
Mm.
I'm an avid reader. I would read. I mean, I guess avid to some people, they probably read three times as many, but I was reading 25 books a year in addition to reading my Bible every day. And after my sister was killed, I just stopped reading completely for like a year. And then same thing happened after Trudy died. I sat there and thought to myself, what am I mad at him? Am I trying to spite him, or that I'm not going to read his word? What is going on here? I've never ever fully unpacked what happened there, but the same thing happened again. There's a book by out there by, I believe it's Chuck Missler, called Faith in the Night Seasons, when you know crap happens that's not good. And you know, even though I maybe did audibly hear from the Lord, I've always known that He's been there. I've
Mm.
always known, never questioned that. I mean, I got to see it come into fruition when my son turned his life back over to Christ and got sober. So I've seen, again, I've just seen too many things to maybe I'm a simpleton. Let's just put it that way. I don't really, um, like I like there are some people that want to question their faith all the time, or question people who have faith. It's it's kind of like me when I get on an airplane. I don't know how it works. I just know I'm going to get up in the air and I'm going to come down,
Mm.
preferably with wheels. Okay. Don't have any. I don't have any. I just the KISS method. I keep it simple, stupid. I just don't. I just don't try to. There are things that I won't know in this lifetime, and I don't try. I try not to get bogged down in that. And because again, uh, I've known some very, very smart people that were, I mean, some of the smartest people I've ever met, but when it came to common sense, they were rather box rocks. Um, um, so, I just keep it simple. I can't, Drew, if I could bottle it and say, hey, this is what you do on a daily basis. Um, and, as I went through all this stuff, there's things I found out about myself.
Hmm.
Caleb was, when Caleb was born, I found out I was ADHD. Before that, I thought I was an idiot because I just couldn't concentrate, couldn't focus, and all that. When I found out I was ADHD, they took me around to different rooms. They said, this guy's got a college degree. They couldn't believe I had a college degree because of the level of, I mean,
Hmm.
they simple tests like, hey, I'm going to ask you three questions. On the second question, it was like, they said, name three flowers or something. And they said, we're going to come back to that. Just remember those three flowers. They asked one other question that came back to it. And I literally I'm like, I named the first one and I don't know if it was flowers or what, but I was just and I mean, and so for many years, I thought, gosh, I must not be that smart.
Hmm.
And then after I was diagnosed, I did start doing research. So, I mean, there's neuroscientists, there's people who have brilliant minds that are ADHD. So for me, one of the things that helps me on a daily basis is I try to be fairly structured. So I have a routine almost every day. Some of it's pretty boring. Like I get up every morning and I put on worship music and I clean the house. My wife goes to work every day. That's even an amazing story. My late wife tells me, I want you to move on. I want you to get married. I want you to be happy. I'm looking out the window sobbing because I'm like, I don't want to hear any of this.
Hmm.
But the woman gave me one of the greatest gifts. So I reconnect with my best friend in college. We never dated. Colleen and I never dated. Um, we were just best friends. And uh, and after Trudy died, I had some extra time on my hands because I had made a decision to retire. And so I decided I was going to step away because I was in a pretty stressful job. So I was going to step away. I'm busier now than before I retired, to be honest with you. But where was I going with that? Um,
Meeting Colleen.
yeah, well, I was just trying to unpack. So so I was on So I was trying to reconnect with some of my college teammates that I played baseball with in college. I had downtime. I was like, there were nights that I wouldn't get to bed at 5 a.m. I horrible time sleep. I mean, it wasn't uncommon for me to get through a normal day at 5 and 12 hours later, I'm still sitting in a chair just staring in La La Land or at TV or something like that. And that was really difficult for me because I was never one to watch TV, and I started watching everything under the sun. I mean, I never watched TV. I mean, people ask me today, "Hey, did you see that when you were a kid?" Like, no, no clue. Well, I have no idea. Um, but so I started reaching out. I thought, well, I'll just kind of reconnect with some of my college teammates. Well, um, I went to school, or I played baseball with Colleen's cousin,
Hmm.
Tim. So I'm like trying to find him on Facebook, and I'm thinking, maybe he goes by a nickname because I couldn't find him at all. Well, I was getting a little frustrated, so I went to one of my other teammates, and he had 1,400 contacts, and I went through every single one of Kevin's contacts. And I don't find Tim, but I come across Colleen. Now, 4 years before, I tried to find her on Facebook, and I couldn't find her. And I knew her last name had two N's. It's not like I didn't know how her looked. I couldn't find her. So I'm like, I find her in Kevin's contacts, so I just shoot her a message and say, hey, what's going on or something like that. So well, she said, do you want to get together for dinner? And this is again, this gets back to my whole if I, it, or to to people's potential for joy. If I was so bogged down with all the baggage and everything like that, I honestly don't believe number one I would have been in a position where I was ready to see someone or anything along those lines. When Trudy said, I want you to move on, I want you to get married, I want you to be happy, in my mind, I'm thinking, this ain't going to happen.
Hmm.
This is not going to happen. we were together almost 29 years. And I asked my daughter, Haley, after her mom passed away, I said, hey, do you know of anybody that had a better marriage than your mom and I? And she said, Dad, no one. Absolutely no one. And what that did for me was, the kids would say, hey, we can help, we can come over and help you with mom and stuff. And I learned from a great example when that happened when she was sick. Because obviously I had the role of caretaker. But when my mom got sick, it would take my dad. My dad was in his 70s. He was in his late 70s. It would take him 2 hours to bathe my mom. And I would witness, how my dad served my mom. And so I said, I don't have to do this. I get to do this. And I want to. And I said, if it ever gets to the point that I can't do that, I'll let you know. And I remember shortly after she had passed away, how exhausted I was. Like I was like literally, it was one of two things. I'd either sleep or I couldn't sleep, one of the two. But I was just, and I had a friend of mine say, Dave, being a caretaker is a lot of responsibility. I'm like, you're in the middle of it. You don't know you're going through it.
You don't see it.
Yeah. It's kind of like getting your kids ready to get off to college. You're always in the hoopla. And then once they leave the nest, you're like, what just happened? So, but yeah, the whole thing with Colleen, it's just amazing. So I'm thinking to myself, I reach out to her, we get together to catch up, and I knew instantly that she was the one. I mean, we went to dinner, and then I went home thinking, oh my gosh, what just happened? Because there was 32, 33 years in between there. Hadn't seen each other, didn't know what she looked like, is there any attraction or anything like that? And it turned out to be just, pretty incredible. And I think to myself, like I said to you before, when I asked Haley, do you know anybody that had a better marriage than your mom and I? And she said, no, Dad, absolutely no one. Well, Colleen and I get to have that great relationship. And I really do credit Trudy for giving me some bumpers and some guidance along the way to outside of my relationship with Christ, most influential person I've ever met in my life to help guide me and steer me. So I really believe that, I've told Colleen this, I feel like she's the beneficiary of a better version of me, her as a result. There's always things that you wish you would have done more of. Like I wish I would have pumped her gas more and, helped me more and all those things. But, when I look back to when she was diagnosed and that 9 months of being by her side, I don't really have any regrets. And I remember calling a friend of mine who had worked in hospice, and I snuck out of the house, and I really felt like, it was getting close, and I called this person, and I remember her telling me that it sounded like it was, and I just stopped. I mean, what do you do? What do you do? But, and then, when I see about God's hand in things, Colleen and I had a great relationship, a great marriage, and she was very, very wise in how everything flowed with my kids. Because, that's a whole other bird's nest that I never had to even envision. Like, how do you go about, how do you, when do you introduce, when do you do this, when do you do that? And I made a mistake. I'll be upfront with you. I made some mistakes along in my life, and one of them was I was dating Colleen, and out of respect for the kid's mom, I would respect for Trudy, I would post something on Facebook, and birthday or anniversary or something like that, and I remember, I can't remember what I posted, but it bothered her. As a matter of fact, one of her family members messaged her and said, hey, are you okay? And ever since we started dating, we FaceTimed every day. Whether I was in Colorado for 10 days, I FaceTimed her every day. It's just kind of how our dating evolved. Because I just think communication is so critical. That particular day, she didn't want to talk to
Hmm.
me, and she sent me a chapter out of a book on what it's like to date a widower. And it was the aha moment where I said, "Oh my gosh, I gotta." And so I made that decision right then and there because I was posting stuff to honor their mother, which is great, but then her family might take offense. Then if I posted something, you know, a bunch of mushy gushy stuff about Colleen and I, the kids might take offense. So at that point in time, I took a step back and really kind of did, didn't really, I don't really, I'm not, I mean, I'm not a big Facebook person. I mean, I'll look at it, but I don't really do a lot of posting, uh, for that reason. It's I basically have had to learn.
Yeah.
So I was a little slow on the curve, but I picked it up.
Yeah. So, with everything that you've been through, you've cited your faith as being one of the most important things that's helped you get through it all. What would be the main thing that's about your faith that's helped you process everything and continue to be here? And if someone was really not of faith or believing in God, what's something that you could recommend to them to either get closer to God or to understand where you're coming from?
Well, there's a couple things that I probably address. The first one is, you know, back to that whole component I shared a little bit with why I have faith. Well, when you get that prompting and all that, uh, I had one of my cousins had a son who was terminally ill with a brain tumor, and it went from bad to worse, and they just said basically take him home so he can get, just so he can be comforted until he passes. And I was working in prison ministry at the time, and obviously, again, my faith component has come a long way, and I was working in prison ministry at the time, and I went into one of the prisons in Iowa, and I asked the guys that were in the prison program that I was part of, which is the Interchange Freedom Initiative. It's part of Chuck Colson's prison ministry. I said to the guys, we pray for so and so. This is what's going on. And so every I would be there every 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, and so we'd pray as a group, and again, it gets back to those gut feelings. And I didn't have this all the time, but I remember praying over that situation, and I felt a peace come over me. And again, I can't pin it on anything Drew specifically. I just felt real peace. So I go into the facility one day, and my buddy Ron says, "Hey, what's going on with so and so?" I said, "Honestly, I don't know." But I said, "When I leave the prison over lunch, I'll call and see if I can find out." So I call my cousin and find out that um, doctors don't know what happened. They went from bad to worse. They had to do an emergency tracheotomy because he stopped breathing. All this. They took him off all of his medications and everything like that. They had just gotten back from doing scans, and the doctors are completely stumped. There's no brain tumor.
Hmm.
They have no idea why. And so my cousin asked me, why? I said, I know why. Do you know why he's healed? And so we had a kind of a chuckle over that. Here's how I guess I would approach it to somebody maybe who doesn't have faith or maybe questions it. I am so resolute in my belief. I just, again, I've just seen too much to not have faith. Okay. And so for somebody that's not been a believer, I'll give you an example. When I first came to Christ, my mouth was the worst thing known to me. I mean, I worked in corrections. If you swear like a sailor, you're a sailor. I mean, it was bad. And I remember when I came to Christ, it was gone.
Hmm.
And and it was a little awkward for a while because I'll be honest, where let's say I stubbed my toe in the past, I would drop this, that, or so then I'm like, well, there's got to be something for me to say. So I would say stupid stuff like, it's smash my toe, and I'd go poop. That's not real. But that literally was the first thing. It was gone. I can't. I mean, it was gone, and it was just so second nature. I guess the biggest thing to the non to somebody who, I shouldn't say non-believer because maybe they just don't know. I think the biggest thing I could say is that, oftentimes we try to do things in our own might and our own understanding. Um,
Hmm.
and you have to sometimes get to the point where you're sick and tired of being sick and tired. And, you know, I was 33 before I came to Christ. I wasn't this 14-year-old or 10-year-old who came to Christ and knew they were going to do this the rest of their life. No, I was 33. I was a misfit. I was not, I mean, my first year of high school, my GPA was 1.4. I'm not proud of that, but the reality is, I mean, if you're breathing, you pretty much have a 1 point. I mean, so bad that when I thought I was going to go to college, University of Iowa wouldn't even accept me. I never heard of anybody like the university not accepting somebody from Iowa. I was like, what? So they said I had to go to a junior college for a couple of years or something like that. Um, but you know, getting to the point where you're sick and tired of being sick and tired and deciding that, hey, I'm going to do things different.
Hmm.
And step up. I think in the faith world, one of the biggest problems that I see is sometimes the church doesn't do a real good job of witnessing to other people.
Hmm.
Uh, and I'm not trying to bash churches, but let's be honest, you know, sin is sin. I mean, we got things going on in the world. Um, the other day, somebody asked me something. I said, well, "What's the Bible say?" That's my reference point. What's the Bible say? It's not what I say. I try to line up with what God's word says. Now
Yeah.
that doesn't mean, okay, so if you're using drugs, you've had an abortion, you've all this stuff. That doesn't mean that you don't love them. God hates a sin, but He loves the sinner, and that should be our take. We can be so judgmental. Holy cow, can we be judgmental? And it's so unfortunate and sad. Um, Bottom line is that who's the hospital for? The
The
healthy?
sick.
It's not for the healthy. Exactly. And the church is the same way. So
Hmm.
if you go into a church and they're all and again, I'm not critical of somebody who goes to church in three-piece suit. It's not what I'm saying. But if they don't reach outside of the four walls, then what are they doing? Because
Hmm.
it isn't meant to be within those four walls. Um, Find out what they do in the community. Get a grasp on who they are. If they're not teaching the Bible, maybe find a different church. I remember when going to church in Cedar Rapids. I don't live in Cedar Rapids anymore, but I remember going to church early on, and when I started to question and start to think about a personal relationship with Christ. And I went to a church, and they kept referring to Jesus Christ as young seed. And I thought, even in my spirit, again, I don't really have faith. I'm just like meandering. I'm like, that seems kind of, and then I remember them telling me that they said, there's no such thing as hell. God wouldn't be hell based. And I'm like, well, I don't know a lot, but I can start reading through stuff and see that that's, so I'm like, peace out. But, here's another thing I'll share with you, and I'll let you go. But when I started in my personal relationship with Christ, I use the Bible as my reference point. And what I mean by that is, so I got the Left Behind series. I don't know if you've ever read it, but
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's a very popular series. But I didn't know, like, when I saw something biblical written in there, I didn't know if it was real or not. So I went and got my Bible and I cross-referenced it. So,
Hmm.
like, let's read something, they say the Lord says, da da da, whatever. I would go cross-reference it with God's word to see if it was actually what it said. So for 2 years, I didn't read anything other than, for example, the Bible and then like the Left Behind series because I went through it. I'm like, this lines up, this lines up, this lines up, and I just kept going like that. Tim LaHaye and I don't know who the other authors are, but I mean, it was incredible. So but I cross-referenced. We're in a situation, we're in an information overload situation in the world today where there's almost too much information. And then we have to decipher what's true and what's not true. So that's what I did. I really guarded, they guard your eye gate, your ear gate, and all that. And that's what I really did because I knew that I didn't know enough to know enough. So I was like, hey, I don't want to open up, Pandora's box. I just said no. Well, so, but so that's really, and again, I would just encourage anybody that's, went through challenges, went through struggles, anything along those lines. Griefshare.org, that's a great resource for somebody that's went through the loss. Here's the thing. Here's one last thing, Drew, and I'll let you go. But it frustrates me that the schools teach, I think I shared this example with you when we spoke, let's say I don't want to drive. Okay. I think it's weird that nobody would want to drive, but it is what it is. So I have a family member, it's going to remain nameless, but anyway, they don't drive. Not a problem at all. But they teach drivers at the schools. But my question is, what do they teach about grief in the schools? The common denominator we all have. Not everybody's going to do home ec because not everybody's going to cook. Not everybody's going to sew. Not everybody's going to play music. Not everybody's going to do this. Not everybody's going to, go to a major university for this, that, or other thing. One thing everybody's going to do is they're going to lose a loved one. And there's no curriculum in the schools. I didn't know how to deal with it. And I have no doubt in my mind that part of Caleb's struggles after he lost his mom and then his best friend was he had no idea how to cope. Keep in mind, I was, at the time I was 56, 57, and I'm trying to cope. I can't imagine you being a 18, 19-year-old kid trying to figure out how to cope. I was having trouble, but they don't teach that. And so I would encourage anybody, griefshare.org, again, find a local church, find out what they're about. And the one other thing too is that, I've heard it said, well, you have no idea what I went through. There's probably some legitimacy to that, but the other thing is we all also don't know what kind of shoes they're walking in. So I hesitate to bash people to that because, again, it gets back to treat people with dignity and respect because you have no clue what they went through. I mean, I was still working when Trudy was, I worked through the first 6-7 months of her going through treatments. I took a ton of leave. Thank God I saved it, had it. But I took a ton of leave for us to unpack and walk in somebody else's shoes, people have no idea. No idea. And so I think it's really dangerous to get in a position where we, lash out when maybe there's something going on behind the scenes that we're not even aware of. It might be a mental health issue that they've never had resolved. It could be, there's a combination of things. So I just encourage people to, reach out again, griefshare.org. I was going to just mention one more time that podcast is, not that, again, the only thing I don't like about the podcast or not the podcast, but the documentary is because they took out my faith out of it. But I think if you watched it, you could kind of pick up on some of the nuances of me sharing my faith. But that's on Discovery Plus, Deadliest Moms and Dads, season 2, episode 2. And I think your mom said it was on, she wrote Max, and I assume that was Cinemax.
HBO Max.
HBO Max. See, I don't have that, so I don't even know. I think that's season 3, episode 2. I believe is how she shared that to me on that. But
absolutely. Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, girl. Hey, have a good one.
You too. Man, that was an incredible conversation. Dave Kesterson is really an amazing man, and I'm glad that I had a chance to speak to him. Like, that was I say this every single time. That was one of my favorite conversations, and I hope that continues, where the next conversation becomes my favorite conversation. Now, we have a few special guests coming that I think will be perfect for you guys tuning in, so just do me a favor, once again, like, subscribe, follow us on social media. We're on TikTok. I have a personal LinkedIn. And go ahead and send out these clips that we made to your friends and family. Spread the word of the podcast. It really does mean a lot. Thank you so much. Have a blessed day.